competitive and very strong. I think the key word in our market right now is price. Price. You have got to make sure you have that list price dialed in. We are seeing multiple offers, but we're not seeing multiple offers on prices on homes that are overpriced. We're seeing those sit for a couple weeks. We're seeing price adjustments. And really trust your professional. If you hire a realtor to resell your flips, to resell your homes, let them kind of give you that number and leave that conversation. We had one that we listed about a week and a half ago, and it was a new flip, and it was a beautifully done house. Everything on it was new, exterior, interior, just gorgeous. But the square footage just wasn't there. And so they really, really wanted to push like a 270, 280 number. And, the comps were really around the 235 number, maybe 240. And so we were able to justify a 250 list price. And we were able to still get multiple offers at 250. We didn't get much over 250. But it was able to get it sold and done with like a 3.5 week close. So, it was a quick turn on it. But had we priced that thing at 270, 280, it'd still be on the market. And so price is the name of the game. And being competitive on price is still generating those multiple offers. And it's still getting us over asking price if, depending on the area of the market. So, really dial in that price and know what your list price is going to be. If you need to dial it in early in your project, that's something to do as well. Reach out to your agent and have them really dial that price in so you know what you're looking for as a list price when that thing is ready to go. So other than that, market is very competitive. Lots of buyers out there. If you've got anything in the St. Charles County area that's 300 and under, it's on fire. That you're still looking at multiple offers and getting over asking price on those. But the St. Louis market in general is still really strong. We are seeing a few road bumps out there though with buyers. So be prepared. When interest rates go up like this, it gets harder for that money to get to the finish line. And so, if someone is trying to get to the finish line with a 4% rate and their numbers are tight, that's easier. When you're talking 7 to 8% rates and numbers are tight, it gets a lot harder for those buyers to get to the finish line. And so if you can secure a backup offer on your properties, especially if you're in a multiple offer situation and you've got somebody that's willing to put in an offer as a backup so you have that, I always encourage that. Simply because the fact that, we are seeing a few more mutual releases going out than we were in the past, just because money is more expensive. And so it's harder for some of those buyers to get to that finish line. And, unfortunately for the seller, our contracts are pretty buyer specific, and they're protecting those buyers a little bit more than they're protecting the sellers. And so, we're going to do everything we can to collect your earnest money for you if someone walks away. But if they've got that contingency in there and they've got the ability to walk away, if they get that denial, they're gonna get to walk away from it. So having that backup offer is good, but just keep that in the back of your mind that even though some of those really strong offers that are coming through, if the money on the back end is tight, we try to reach out and have those conversations with the lenders for those buyers. So always very important to do. But otherwise, I think we're going to see a strong summer. I don't see prices decreasing at all. Just make sure your numbers are in line when you go to price those houses. So that's the biggest thing right now is price point. So, and I know Suzanne is conservative with her numbers, and that's always a good thing because, if you shoot for here and you end up hitting here, then spectacular. That's bonus money, but keep those numbers dialed in. So that'll be very important moving into the summer months. But I kind of want to switch gears and we can talk, any questions you got on the market, you can hit those with me after we get done here. But I want to switch gears and talk about the NAR settlement that everybody's talking about. It has been a topic of conversation since NAR settled. So as you guys know, there were actually multiple lawsuits that were pending. One, and the one that had the most traction, it was a class action suit, had been certified for class action, was out of the Kansas City area here in Missouri. It named 4 different brokerages and NAR. 2 of the brokerages settled prior to trial. It went to trial, and the brokerages and NAR lost. So with that, the only thing that came from that case and that loss was a multi-billion-dollar settlement that NAR and the other brokerages would have to pay. So NAR immediately appealed it along with the other brokerages. And if you guys have ever been involved in any litigation or civil litigation, it's long, it's a massive process. You're going to fight it until you can't fight it anymore. And while they were continuing to fight and file the appeals, NAR in the background was also working towards settlement. And then a few weeks back, NAR ended up settling with settling the case and came up with a settlement agreement. The settlement agreement still has to go in front of a judge, which won't happen for about another 5 to 6 months for final approval. We don't have any indication at this point that it will not be approved by the judge. But that will probably happen within the next 5 or 6 months. In the meantime, the terms of that settlement have been laid out, and we are all preparing in our industry to move forward with the terms of those settlements. So the first part of the settlement was the monetary amount to the plaintiffs, and that monetary amount is $418 million to be paid out over 4 years. NAR is the National Association of Realtors has been meeting and is going to be meeting again this month. They're figuring out what that payment looks like and how that's going to be done. There'll be an initial payment 90 days after the settlement is approved by the judge, and then the rest of it will be paid out over 4 years. And so they're in a financial position to make those payments. And that was one of the reasons that they decided to make the settlement, was to avoid, if the original settlement had stood and we had to post the original settlement, the National Association of Realtors would have had to file Chapter 11 bankruptcy and probably had to go into a restructure. And we don't know what that would have looked like. And for 1.5 million members, that wasn't an option for them to let that go that way. So that was one of the reasons for settling. The second reason that NAR accepted the settlement was it settles this for 95% of the realtors and brokerages and MLSs and associations across the country. So what happened was as soon as that first settlement came down, all of these other ambulance chasers and all of these other attorneys started saying, you can sue too, we should do this. And so we started seeing copycat cases popping up all over the country, where people who had a great experience with their realtor decided that they could sue too and try to get some money. So what this settlement does is it now puts it to bed and says, with this settlement, those copycat cases cannot come back up. So an individual realtor, a brokerage, an MLS, an association, National Association of Realtors can no longer be sued for this reason with this settlement. The only people that are excluded from that are brokerages that had $2 billion or more in total volume in 2022. So there's about 90 brokerages across the country that don't qualify for this settlement, but otherwise everybody else is protected by it. So that's a good thing. That's a great thing for all realtors, all the associations, all of the MLSs that are across the country. So those were the 2 big reasons why they settled. So outside of the monetary settlement, there are 2 new rule changes that come with the settlement. And what I would tell you is, if you've heard something in the media, 99.9% of the time, what you have heard is absolutely wrong. The story that ran the next morning after the settlement that I heard was 6% listings are gone. NAR no longer controls commissions. Well, 6% was never an amount that was across the board, and NAR never has controlled commissions. As a listing agent and a listing broker, I have always controlled the rates. The rates have always been negotiable. So most of what you're hearing across the media is just completely false information, and they're looking for a headline is what they're looking for. So the two rule changes that came from NAR. Number one is a rule that we don't have to worry about in Missouri because we already have it. And it's a rule that says all buyers, if you're going to represent a buyer, you have to have a written buyer's agency agreement in place to represent that buyer. And Missouri has, along with 17 other states, already has that requirement in place. We have always been required to have a buyer's agency in place with anybody that we're representing. And the reason for that buyer's agency agreement is so that the buyer knows what we are doing for them. And it also makes sure that they know that they're protected in the process. And it tells that buyer up front what my rate is or what any agent's rate is to represent you as a buyer. It's always been there. And so most buyer agencies that are out there, there's a rate that's listed on that buyer agency of anywhere between 2% and 3% that basically says that as a buyer's agent, my rate to represent you is, let's say, 2.5% of the sale price. And if the seller doesn't agree to compensate me as a buyer's agent, then that amount is your requirement to pay me. You have to pay me that. That's my rate to represent you. And we're probably one of the only industries that are out there that we have you sign that agreement up front, and we don't collect any money from you. We work for free until the deal closes. That's where it is as a buyer's agent. So the new rule on the settlement agreement that says you have to have a buyer agency in place, we already do that in Missouri. If you've been represented by a realtor to purchase a home in Missouri, you have signed a buyer's agency with them. And so that doesn't change for us. There's nothing there that's changing. So that was number one in the settlement. And then the second thing in the settlement is commissions. And what the settlement says is that we are no longer allowed to offer compensation, cooperating compensation amounts through the MLS. So right now, when we represent one of you guys as a seller, you sign a listing agreement with us that says you agree to pay this percentage, and then this amount of that percentage goes to pay a buyer's agent. Okay, so that conversation for most realtors across the country isn't going to change. If you want me to represent you as a seller, here is my rate. And then we have to come up with a rate of compensation for a buyer's agent. And a buyer's agent, that has always been negotiable. Commissions have always been negotiable. If you don't like what you're paying your agent, you can have a conversation with your agent about what that rate is. And you know, we work very, very hard for all of our sellers, all of our buyers. And so, you know, what we try to have that conversation with you guys about is, look, if we're going to take a listing for, you know, 3% for me, and we're going to offer compensation to a buyer's agent, what compensation rate do you want to offer? And so if you say, you know, look, we'll do 3% to you, and we're going to do 2.5% to a buyer's agent, your total commission rate is 5.5. And then we send that out. We used to publish that 2.5% in the MLS. And so every agent that showed your property knew what the rate of compensation was going to be. What this settlement does is it makes it a little bit more difficult for the agents, because now we are not going to be able to publish that rate of compensation in the MLS. That is all this settlement says. So now that rate of compensation will be published in 900 other places if you're offering compensation. And there's a lot of people that immediately have called and said, so we don't have to pay a buyer's agent anymore. Here's the thing, guys, you never had to pay a buyer's agent. That was always an option you had. If you said, I do not want to offer compensation, and then the next words out of my mouth were, okay, that is completely acceptable. However, here's what you're doing to your listing. Here's what you're doing to your product that you're putting on the market. The worst part about not offering compensation to a buyer's agent is that now you are limiting your pool of what buyers can actually afford your house. And the group that gets screwed the most in this settlement is anybody that's utilizing a VA loan. We have literally screwed veterans that have earned the right to get a VA loan. And I'm a huge proponent of VA loans. I represent a lot of sellers, and I have sellers all the time. They're like, oh man, it's a VA loan. I'd rather get a conventional loan. VA loans, guys, sometimes have the best backing and they're the easiest to get through. I know some people have had issues with a VA appraiser sometimes. For the most part, we can work through those issues, but VA loans are very easy to get to the finish line if the lender knows what they're doing. And so why veterans are getting screwed in this deal, in the settlement, is it is written into the lending rules for VA loans that a veteran cannot pay a commission when taking a loan through the VA. It's not allowed. So if you have a property that you list and you don't offer compensation to a buyer's agent, and you have somebody that wants to write you an offer on that property that is utilizing a VA loan, they only have two options. One, they walk away from your property and they don't give you an offer because they can't pay their agent. Two, they terminate their contract with their buyer's agent and they go at it alone, unrepresented, to buy your property, which is not fair to them. That if they want representation, they should be allowed representation. So that's one of the biggest issues that's out there. So if you hear people saying you don't have to pay buyer's agencies anymore, you've never had to pay buyer's agencies. However, the way that our free market works and the way our market works, and works so well, is because of the system that we have in place. So most agents across the country aren't going to change the way they do business. They're still going to recommend that you pay a buyer's agency commission. But that, just remember, the buyer's agency commission has always been negotiable. That's always been something that you can have a conversation with your agent about and make a decision on what you want to pay a buyer's agent. We have always had the same rules in place. Nothing changes there outside of the fact that we can now no longer put that for compensation in the MLS. Outside of that, everything stays the same. I don't think we're going to see much of a change in our market. There's going to be a few agents that, promote the fact that they don't have to pay a buyer's agent anymore. And that's going to make it very, very difficult for not only VA buyers, but I mean, you guys can remember the first time you bought a house, and most of you can remember that. And you remember that you had barely enough money for your down payment, and you had enough money for your closing costs. And if you had to tack on another $5,000 or $10,000 for commissions on top of that, you wouldn't have been able to afford that house. And so it's going to hurt first-time homebuyers' opportunities. It's going to hurt anybody who doesn't have the funds to pay that if a seller isn't offering compensation to a buyer's agent. So the way that we're looking at this is that not much is going to change in our market. It's just going to be a different way that agents have to communicate with each other to figure out what that offer of compensation is. And you're going to see some that have 0% compensation, and we had that before. We've had out-of-town buyers in our market, or out-of-town sellers in our market, that list in the MLS, and they've had compensation of $500. That's what they're paying a buyer's agent. And so what me as the buyer's agent has to do is when I go to show that property to my buyer, I have to explain to them the seller's offering $500 in compensation, and my rate is 2.5 of the sale price. So if you want to move forward with this property, you would have to be willing to pay that difference at closing. And you know what? I've had buyers that have written me a check for it, and they're not, paid it at closing. And it's happened like that before this settlement. So the settlement, all it does is change where and how it's published when it comes to commission rates. And I think I'm always, change is good. And the ability to adapt is good. And that's one of our core values, and it's on our wall. We're always changing, we're always adapting. So, we are going to embrace this change. I think it's going to be good because it's going to allow us to have better conversations with not only our buyers, but also our sellers on how compensation is handled. And I think you're going to see a few changes to the contract. I think you're going to see a few changes to your listing agreements and your buyer agency agreements that helps to clearly outline what that compensation is and what you're paying and where it's being paid. I always thought that commission rates, should be included on the contract as a part of the contract so that all parties, buyer and seller, know exactly who's getting paid what and where that money's coming from. That's one thing that we haven't done well, is that commission rates have always been between brokers. So a lot of times, if you've got a buyer that has said, hey, look, I'm the buyer, I'm the agent, but I'm also the buyer. I'll waive my commission to get this house at a discounted price. When I'd watch those closing statements come through, half the time the seller never got the discount. The listing agent just took the full 6% or 7% or 8%, whatever it was, and pocketed the whole thing and nobody got a discount. So I think you're going to see more transparency that's going to come out of this because of the settlement. But at the end of the day, I don't see a huge change coming to the industry. It's just a way that those commissions are put out there and how they're marketed. So for us at Magnolia, our website has already been updated. And so once the change goes into effect in July, that the buyer compensation is no longer in the MLS, Magnolia agents will simply input all your guys' listings into the MLS. Once it's active, they'll flip over to our site and there'll be a box, they'll plug in whatever the buyer compensation is. And so then agents that want to know what Magnolia is paying out on a listing will just have to visit our website and they'll know upfront what that number is. And again, guys, this is one thing that was really good about the way our system is right now is there was never any question of what that compensation amount was. One of my concerns with the change on this is that if it's not published anywhere by a brokerage, that you have agents that say, okay, well, it's this number for this agent and it's this number for that agent, which leads to all kinds of ethics and fair housing violations and everything else. So, it does stink that we're not going to be able to publish that information in there anymore. But at the end of the day, I don't see a whole lot changing in how we do business. To get you guys, if you have flipped a house and you want the most offers and the highest number of offers and the highest sale price, the best way to capture that is still going to be to offer a buyer's compensation to a buyer's agent. At the end of the day, that's going to be the best way to do it. You talk to anybody else anywhere in the world, the way that we do real estate in the United States is revered around the world. This is our system works and it works better than anybody else's. And so do we have a bump in the road here? Just a little one. And we're going to move forward from it. And it's not going to change a whole lot of what we do. It's just going to be kind of where that's displayed and how it's displayed. So, and hopefully, a lot of people said, oh, we're going to see this mass exodus of agents from the industry. We're not going to see a mass exodus. We're going to see probably some of the ones that can't show their value, that don't do anything for you anyway, drop out because they're not going to be able to justify what they do or how they do it. But the agents that are out there, I know what my rate is and I know what I charge for that rate and the value that I bring to the table and what my agents bring to the table. And we're not going to change that. And we're going to make sure that we continue to provide that value to you guys. And if you're working with an agent that's not one of mine, make sure they're bringing you that value. Make sure that you're getting that value, for what you're getting. And that's there's a lot of agents that got lazy over the last couple of years, guys. 2 years ago, year and a half ago, you dropped a sign in the front yard at interest rates are at 3.5% to 4%. Money's easy. People were buying stuff. You didn't even have to do anything. And there's a lot of work that goes into listing a house. There's a lot of work that goes into a buyer's agency, and it's hours and hours of time and hundreds of calls and text messages. And if you guys know, go back and scroll through your messages with your agent and see how many times you have messaged your agent or they have messaged you, and how many emails back and forth. It's a lot of work that goes into that, and that's not going to change. And the agents that aren't putting in that work, bye. So they just make our jobs harder. So we'll see some good stuff come out of this at the end. But overall, stop listening to the media. The media doesn't know what they're talking about. They're looking for a headline. So end of the day, market's going to be fine. And, there's a lot of people that say, well, we're gonna be able to get houses cheaper now for that. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not selling mine any cheaper than what I'm selling them for now. So, we're gonna keep seeing that market increase just because of supply and demand. So if you guys got questions, anything along those lines, so I think I saw something pop up in the chat. Let me see if I can. Let's see here. Is 3% too much for buyer's agent? No, buyer's agency, typically on a buyer's agency, you're going to see any rates of compensation anywhere from probably I'd say 2.25 all the way up to 3.5. So I have seen there's a lot of agents out there that when they list a home for 7% and they do a 3.15 or a 3.3 payout for a buyer's agent. So, it just, and that's kind of the thing that just, pardon my French, pisses me off about all this is that, everybody says, well, there's always been a set rate. There hasn't been a set rate. You have always been able to negotiate. And, I have agents that don't take listings for less than 7%. That's their rate. They say, I get paid 3.5%. That's my listing rate. And I pay out this much to a buyer's agency. Or they'll coach their client as to this is, and guys, that's the other thing is that buyer's agents do pay attention to that. And when we were in the recession, when we couldn't, beg people to buy our houses, if you went out, a lot of times that was a marketing technique. You increase the buyer's agency commission to try to get those buyer's agents to show that house, or you offered an agent bonus. I can remember in 2015, we had a house that had been flipped and it was beautiful. We couldn't get anybody to buy it because nobody was buying houses. And so we offered a $5,000 agent bonus and, it's gone through. So that kind of stuff has always been negotiable. It's just kind of weird because right now we're in such a competitive market that everybody's like, well, I don't understand what they're doing. Well, there's a lot that we're doing. It's just, a lot of times that's just kind of behind the scenes. Another question in there, what is the most you have ever seen on a listing commission? So a lot of, land deals, commercial land, 10% is not uncommon.
Wow.
For there is a commercial agent who sells land in the St. Louis market, and that rate is 10%. And so, that's the other thing too with this settlement is commercial has always been this way, guys. So commercial has always been, the commission rate's not published, So when I do a commercial deal, I call the listing agent and I say, hey, what's the split on this? And they say, well, it's a 6% commission and we're splitting it 50-50. So you'll get 3 and I'll get 3. And I'll say, can you put that in writing? And they'll say, nope. And they'll say, when we close, you get 50% of the commission. And so that's just how it is. And so I don't think we're going to see exactly that in this market, but you will see some of that, where you're just going to have to kind of hope that the other side pays you at the end of the deal. But that's, when people talk about what we do, and, I've had people say, oh, you guys make too much money. You know what? These guys work 60, 90, 120 days sometimes without a paycheck just to get this thing to the finish line for you guys. And they've earned every dime of that. And so, we know that your bottom dollar is important, but hopefully you're seeing the value that your realtor brings. And if you're not, you should probably look for a new realtor. And that's just how it plays out. Let's see here. I got another question in there. Will this perhaps pit one agent against another? Example, buyer says, will you drop your percentage to 2.5 because so-and-so agent from broker B will charge me 2%. Think that'll be happening more. So that already happens now. It happens quite a bit. I think with one of the questions that comes with that, Meg, is it's going to be a lot of that's going to be determined on how agents are relaying the commission agreements to each other. So with Magnolia, like our plan is we're going to publish that on our website up front and be completely transparent with it. So we're gonna say, hey, look, we're selling this property and our seller is offering 2.5% buyer agency commission. And we're gonna be upfront with that. What I'm hoping that we don't see is the commission becomes a negotiating tool for the contract for the buyer. Because that's really gonna put people in a really tough spot. Do I get paid, or do I get my buyer this house? Or do I charge my buyer this amount and not ask the seller for it? And is the buyer okay with that? Because then what you're gonna have is, right now, for the most part, when you buy a house, you're paying a very small amount of commission, maybe a fixed commission or additional compensation, an admin fee, a lot of them call it. So you're not paying a whole lot. But then when you sell your house, you're paying the commissions. What I'm afraid of is that if people start offering the 0%, to a buyer's agent, then you've got somebody who sells a house and offers buyer compensation and then goes to buy a house and ends up having to pay buyer's compensation again. So I don't know. I hope that we don't see a whole lot of that. And yeah, you're gonna have agents that 100%, I do it right now. When I go on a listing appointment, guys, I go in and I'll talk to the seller, and the seller says, I'm interviewing you and 2 other agents, and one of their agents said I'll beat their commission by 0.5% just to get the listing. And so what I can tell you is that when you hire an agent, you need to know what that agent's bringing to the table. You need to know what you're getting for that. And again, they need to show their value. Hopefully every one of my clients that you talk to, or any client that's a Magnolia client, can come back and say, this is what my agent did extra for me. This is what they did throughout the process. They helped with A, B, C, and D. They were able to negotiate a better deal, or get me a better deal, or get me out of a deal, so hopefully that's something that they can do. But yeah, we already see that. I go up against people all the time. Just last week, I went to a listing appointment, and I went in and, they said, well, this agent said they would do it for 3.2% because we no longer have to pay a buyer's agent. And I said, they're absolutely correct. You never had to pay a buyer's agent, but you are limiting your pool of buyers now drastically by not offering that buyer compensation. And so instead of getting maybe 5 or 6 competing offers, maybe you get 1, or maybe you get, an agent that calls and says, hey, yeah, my buyer is willing to write you an offer on this house, but I'm going to send you a commission agreement and I need you to pay the commission because they can't afford it. And so then you signed a cheaper listing agreement, for 3.2%, but then during negotiations, now you have to pay a buyer's agent 2.7 to get the deal done or get the number you want. So you're still paying it. So you're going to see that. And again, those are all great conversations and great questions to have with the agents that you're interviewing and with the people you're talking to.
Now, do you think it'll affect, I was listening to how you've already taken a really proactive plan with Magnolia and know exactly what you're going to be doing. I'm thinking about some other independent brokerages that I know. Do you think everyone's in alignment and is going to be proactive, or do you think some brokerages might suffer because they're not thinking about a game plan and aren't figuring out how to post it on their website and stuff like that?
Yeah. So I think one thing that I feel like some of the brokerages are doing is they're waiting for the National Association of Realtors, and they're waiting for their local association, their state association, to tell them what to do. The state, national, and local associations have never told us how to charge commission. They can't. It's a violation, of antitrust. So they've never told us what to do with that. So I think that, yes, Suzanne, to answer your question, I think there's a lot of brokerages that are going to sit out there and they're going to say, okay, we're going to wait until July and somebody will tell me what to do. That's not going to come. Yes, our forms are going to change, and there's going to be different spots to put the agreements and the numbers. But as for how you're charging, how those conversations are being had, I mean, we're already meeting with our agents and having classes on how do you have those conversations. And the good thing is those conversations for our brokerage aren't changing much, because it's always been the conversation. I've gone in, I listed a house for one of my best friends, and I went in and gave the listing presentation. And they said, we want this commission rate. And I said, that's not our rate, I don't ask you to change the price of what you do or, lower your hourly rate. We know the value that we bring and we know what we're gonna do for you. And guys, your agents work hard for you and I promise you're getting some of that back, and you just need to, when someone comes in and says, yeah, I can sell it for 3%, because we're not gonna pay a buyer's agent, just know you're not getting the same buyer pool that you would be with before, so.
Yeah, I also think too about other agents. I was chatting with an agent from a different brokerage on Monday, and she was telling me like their office isn't having any of these conversations yet. And so I think it's important, if you are an agent, to make sure your brokerage is taking action and thinking ahead, so that it's not like a surprise when July comes and they don't know what's happening. I always hear your perspective and how prepared, and like you always have a plan of action. And it's been fascinating listening to some other agents who are like in the dark and think what's happened, what the media is saying is what's happening in real life. So I think it's good for you to kind of demystify all of that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's scary, when the initial settlement came out and you hear the initial story that comes across the media as, buyer's agency has gone away. That's not the case. I can't tell you how many buyers we've represented that wouldn't have got into the home that they wanted without a realtor representing them. And, and I think that's my biggest concern, is that either someone wants a house, can't afford to pay the buyer agency commission and goes it alone and gets screwed. Because that listing agent isn't gonna tell them everything they maybe need to know, or they're not gonna, if they're not being represented, we can't just give them the forms. So if you've got a buyer that goes in and does all these inspections and isn't represented and doesn't realize they have to put submit an inspection notice by a certain date, they're just gonna get taken advantage of. So that representation piece is so important, and, not having proper representation is gonna leave a lot of people out in the dark, and that's my concern. Or people just can't afford, if there is a 0% commission being offered by a seller, and that's someone's dream home, they're gonna have to pass on it because they can't afford to pay the buyer agency commission on top of their closing costs and their down payment and everything else. So lots of things to consider and think about. At the end of the day, one of my favorite things about this job is getting those first-time home buyers into a house, handing those keys over, the first generation of somebody who's owned a home in that family. And I just hope that this doesn't curtail that. So.
Yeah, I think all of those are very good points. And I've been talking to someone who hasn't decided if they're going to hire an agent or not, and they just don't know what the heck they're doing. They don't understand to ask for a proof of funds letter. They don't understand inspection periods and stuff like that. And there is so many benefits that agents can bring, as long as they're educated and quality.
Yeah, 100%. And to Alyssa's question in the chat, yeah, Alyssa, we can no longer list it on the MLS, but you can put it everywhere else. So I guarantee you will probably be, Zillow and Realtor.com and all those guys are going to be charging agents to put, if you want to list your buyer's agency commission, you got to pay this and you can post it. We are going to, for Magnolia, Alyssa, we're going to publish all of those buyer agency commissions transparently on our website. So they'll all be published out there. So when somebody signs an agreement with us, if they're offering 2.5% compensation, that's going to be out there. So. Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. Yeah, those websites are going to become very, very important. And so again, it's going to be transparency. That's what I'm afraid we're going to lose with this. Is right now we all know you go to one spot and you see it up front and it's done. Now I'm going to have to probably try to visit 15 different websites to see if there's a rate that's out there, just so that it's documented. But we do have, one thing we do have is there is a form. It's a commission agreement form that we can absolutely send over with an offer that says, hey, here's our offer, and here's what we were expecting in compensation, and then can go from there. So it'll be interesting, but like I said, it'll be good. And in my mind, the more transparent brokerages can make it, the better off we all are.
Awesome. Anyone have any other questions for Matt, or just general questions for the group? I'm curious, before as we were getting started with this, Clint said he just listed a house and got under contract within 2 days, right, Clint? Of
Yeah,
listing?
within 2 days, absolutely.
And you accepted an offer and a backup offer on that one,
And
right?
yeah, and put a backup offer in place, and yeah, absolutely. And yeah, no, just I would echo the comments, and just like you guys know, like I was talking with my kids, right? And it's like I've bought and sold a lot of houses in my life at this point, a lot more than most people, and I see the value in agency huge, especially when they put in the effort, and Matt and his team's been great. So my hat goes off to him.
Well, and I think a lot of it is communication, being able to, it's one of the toughest things in this industry, because you guys all know it as investors and buyers and sellers. There are times where we're talking at 8, 9 o'clock at night, and weekends and holidays, and that's all part of it. But if that communication's not there, I mean, Clint, you're in another state, and I feel like I know you better than I know some of my kids some days,
Yep.
So, but that's how you get that across the finish line with little to no issues, and there are no surprises. And there's going to be stuff that comes up. We all know that. But if you have that line of communication in place and you know how to work together, it makes it so much easier.
Yeah, it's been huge for sure. Hey, I did have one quick question too before, was because you mentioned in the NAR settlement, and I know this is kind of maybe speculation, but you talked about the 90 large brokerages that are kind of excluded from that.
Yep.
What do you think's kind of like, if you had to guess, what do you think's out there for them at this point?
So
in terms of
their agents are included, and that's what a lot of people, their agents are included. It's the brokerages themselves. So at the end of the day, what it turns out to is it's going to be an additional paycheck for the plaintiffs on that. So that's all that's going to come out of that, is those brokerages will end up writing a separate check outside of the initial settlement. So they will eventually be covered under all of this once they come up with a number. But yeah, and that was the concern too, was are all those agents for those 90 brokerages left out of it? And the answer is no, that those agents are covered. It's just the brokerage themselves, their liability is still out there right now.
Yeah.
Who else has something for Matt, or another win or challenge question? I know Cameron shared a little bit earlier when we got
Do
started.
we know why?
Go ahead,
I
Rick.
got a question.
Yeah.
Hello. I've been muting on and off. So, and I've got, I guess, two questions.
Yeah.
Do we know why they don't want the commission in the MLS? And also, I am a huge fan of buyer's agent bonuses also. You drop a little $3,000 note in the remarks or comments of a listing of the agent remarks, and all of a sudden buyers come out of the woodwork. Are you still allowed to do that, or is that got to be on the down low also?
So yeah, with the buyer bonuses or buyer agent bonuses, those are offers of compensation, so will not be allowed to be included in the MLS. And part of there's not, I mean, we don't think, we know. So the Department of Justice had, the DOJ had investigated NAR years ago for antitrust violations, saying, are we a monopoly with how we put all of the agency commissions in the MLS? And we came up with, there was a settlement in that in like 2020, 2019, they created this new rule called clear cooperation. And in my mind, clear cooperation was, I mean, just ass backwards, but that's just me. Because it said, if you're gonna have a listing, you have to publish it within so many days, or you can withhold it and you can only share it with your brokerage. Like, it was just very weird. I think it accomplished the opposite of what they were trying to accomplish. But at the end of the day, Rick, what I think it was the Department of Justice, for antitrust reasons, wanted that compensation removed from the MLS. And so they wrote an opinion to the court of what they would like to see, and that was part of their opinion, was we would like to see all that offer of compensation removed, so that way it's not just it's not considered a unilateral offer of compensation, and it seems more negotiable. So again, I think that was a big part of it, is the Department of Justice wanted that removed from there. And so as a way to almost kill two birds with one stone, settle this lawsuit and also kind of get the Department of Justice in line, I think that was one of the reasons they decided to do it. So.
Seems like that'll make the agent bonuses a lot less effective.
Yeah, again, a lot of it's going to come down to how the brokerages, the individual brokerages, publish that information. And, you know, one thing that we've talked about, and, you know, we're going to see where the legal team takes this, is, you know, one system that we have that it's connected to the MLS, but it is not owned by the MLS. It's a separate entity. It's actually owned by Zillow, is a system called Showing Time. And you guys are all probably familiar with Showing Time, because that's what sends you guys the notices that people are going through your houses. Showing Time is a third party add-on to our MLS. So a lot of us have said, well, what if we can add documents to Showing Time? We can put notes in Showing Time. So what if we just put a note in Showing Time that says, hey, your appointment's confirmed, and by the way, this pays 3% with a $2,000 agent bonus, and it goes right to their phone and they know it up front. So that's something we're looking at, and hopefully if legal gives us the green light on that, we might be able to do that. So question, are you allowed to put buyer bonuses on separate sites though? So the Magnolia site, yes, we will have a spot built in for any bonuses that need to be promoted. As for like Zillow and Realtor and all those guys, I'm assuming they will probably do something similar. It wasn't so the company that we use for our website is they only do real estate websites. And when I took that to them, the first thing they said was, we didn't even think about that. We just thought we'd have to put in a spot for a percentage, and we wanted to make sure that we could put in a spot for a bonus, because sometimes that's what it takes, you know. You start pushing out houses, and if an agent knows they can make a little bit of a bonus on it, they're going to push a little bit harder for their buyer to go through your house. So
Kind of shady, but it works.
yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I kind of have a follow-up question to that. So let's say in the MLS, like, not all brokerages, and to Alyssa's point, not everyone is going to build a website to put it on. But if you are going to do that, can your agents put something in the like notes about like, check on our website, or, you know, for more details? Like,
Yeah,
if that's allowed?
I'm sure that as long as you don't use the words commission or
Buyer's
compensation
commission.
or anything along those lines. I mean, right now, there's nothing out there that says you can't, I mean, that you couldn't put on there, you know, for more information, visit our website, you know, and if agents see that, they know, okay, it's listed out there, because that's going to be the hard part. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I've got, you know, one of our agents that helps with my book of business. He's showing like 5 houses tonight for me, and everyone's listed by a different company. So that means he would have to go out and search 5 different company websites to see, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to take somebody through a house, let them fall in love with it, and then they find out that they're offering no compensation. And so if you want to offer on this, you have to pay our buyer's compensation, or, you know, our buyer's agency fee, and they don't got the $5,000 to do it, you know? And so that's the hard part. So, because you know, and I'm you know, I hate to see anybody not get what they want. And so, you know, now there's nothing out in the rule book that says that the buyers can't ask for a seller concession. So if the buyer says, okay, I want to buy your house for $250, but I want a $5,000 seller paid closing cost credit, so that way the buyer has $5,000 extra to pay towards commission, that's totally acceptable, unless it's a VA loan. If it's a VA loan, that VA buyer can't pay the compensation. So, lots of different stuff to navigate, but I don't know. Real estate's always been complex. It's always been competitive, and it's always been challenging. And this is just another thing that we'll navigate, and and just have to, again, more transparency, having those conversations with your buyers and sellers up front, and letting everybody know how it's played. Yeah, I agree with you, Alyssa. VA is, and just so you guys know, Suzanne knows this, but I'm involved at the local, state, and national level, and I feel like I'm attending a different meeting or briefing every day. We did send the National Association of Realtors and our advocacy team did send off a letter to the Veterans Administration saying we need to change the VA loan rules, and we need to change them quickly. We also sent the same letter to FHA, to Fannie and Freddie, because there are going to be holdups for them as well. And they have acknowledged it, and Fannie and Freddie have already come back and said that they're going to seller concessions for commissions will be allowed. So that's good. And the other good thing is the realtor party. I mean, we're 1.5 million agents across the country. We do have a strong voice on the Capitol. And it was 24 hours after the settlement came down, one of our U.S. Congresswomen called me, and she said, what do I need to do to make sure that our buyers are protected? And so we've got people that they know that this is going to cause some changes and issues. We all know the government is slow as can be, but hopefully they're paying attention, and we're going to get some stuff done. So we'll navigate it. It'll work out just fine, but it might be hard on some of those buyers. And I agree with you, Alyssa. The VA buyers are going to be the biggest one that we just need to make sure we're protecting. A lot of people say, oh, I don't want to take a VA loan because they're they're not putting anything down. Guys, that's something that they earned. That's a privilege that they get. And normally they've got cash in the bank, but they earned that option to take a VA loan and not put down anything. So I'm a huge advocate for VA loans, and I'll take on any VA appraiser any day for you guys too. So if we ever have an issue with that, I'll go to bat for you.
Cool. Well, Matt, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy day to chat with all of us. And if there's anything we can do for you, let us know. But if anyone is looking for a phenomenal agent or a phenomenal brokerage, I just have to promote Matt, because I think Matt is pretty awesome and Magnolia is pretty awesome. So anyways, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. We'll be back again next week. Next week, we have John Duckworth with True Title coming on to speak all things title issues, all of that stuff. So excited to have him on. But if there's anything we can do to help you, don't hesitate to reach out. Otherwise, we'll see you next Wednesday at noon. And thanks again, Matt, for all you do and for chatting with all of us.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys. Take care.
Bye now.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, guys.